tonight I invited on one of the people I love to follow on Twitter. He is a writer and podcaster of the Struggle Sesh, Mr. Leslie Lee the Third. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So your tweets are, I just love them because some are funny, some are sardonic, and some are, rightfully pissed off. So something we've all been talking about, of course, the past 2 days, is Mr. Floyd and what went down in Minneapolis. Right now, I just saw there's an update that people are looting a Target, and it could get kind of ugly. What is your response when you see things like this happen?
I mean, main thing is like here we go again because I mean this has been the political thing that's going to be going on my entire life. I mean, some of my earliest memories of watching the news are the L.A. Or the Rodney King video and the L.A. uprising and like it just keeps happening over and over again. It happened during the Obama era when we finally have a black president, and then it was under that black president where Black Lives Matter as a movement had to rise up because so many unarmed black men were being killed by police on videotape, and basically nothing was happening in response. So it's kind of like same. It's the same thing happening over and over again. There's nothing new happening. It's just the same problem, same reaction, same counter reaction, and it's just like we haven't moved forward on this like at all in my life.
Absolutely. And then, the whole Amy Cooper thing blowing up, rightfully so. And I saw you post about that Jill something, I forget her last name. And
Lipovich, yes.
yeah, and she was talking about, yeah, he's a snack. And you made a good point. And I've seen a lot of people say that, like, he's handsome and he's well spoken. Cool. What does that have to do with anything? So what, if you could just explain to people, what was your take on that?
Yeah,
Seeing people try to rationalize it like that.
yeah. So first of all, like I don't understand why you need to make a point of talking about a guy who's basically having his life threatened by the police state. Talk about the fact that actually he's a snack and he's a nerd and he's one of the cool guys that I would hang black guys that I would hang out with. Like no one cares. You don't have to say that even if you think it. And by even pointing that out, by even saying that, you are implicitly acknowledging the fact that there is a type of black guy who does deserve to have the police called on him if you get into a confrontation with him. There is such a thing as a scary, intimidating black guy who people should live in fear of, and whatever reaction they have to that fear is ultimately justified or based on something real. Like that's not the context you try to put it in. Like I don't understand why, as someone who is trying to be a progressive, would actually acknowledge that false dichotomy, because we have all these false dichotomies about who is a good victim and who is not a good victim, where we're talking about police violence, where we're talking about sexual assault. Like it's the same thing. If we were talking about a situation with a woman, we wouldn't point out that, oh, she wasn't even dressed provocatively. We wouldn't say something like that. Oh, she's a good woman. She doesn't drink excessively, and this thing still happened there. Like, no, we don't have that conversation anymore because we realize it doesn't matter how you dress. It doesn't matter if you drink. It doesn't matter how you behave as an individual. You still don't deserve to be assaulted either by a predator or the police.
Absolutely. And when people make comments like that, sometimes you mention Tara Reid, as you did, with sometimes when that woman Jill posts, she's one of the most hypocritical of the resistors, who loves to slam Tara, and if she ever even mentions her. So we see a lot of that on Twitter. What's your response when you see the hypocrisy of white lib women who just kind of, only care about things when it fits their narrative.
Yeah, I mean, it's really disappointing to me. It's very upsetting to me. So I can only imagine how much my good friend Kay Halper, who was the journalist who broke the Tyree story, she feels seeing these women that she knows who make their bones, made their career talking about feminism and women's rights, and standing up to powerful men when they hurt women. Like they have written so much about this. That Jill Filipovich, she in particular stood out to me because remember, because when Elizabeth Warren said that Bernie Sanders said in a private meeting that he didn't believe a woman could be elected. The day that came out, that rumor came out, Jill Filipovich had a whole article written about it, pointing out the sexism of Bernie Sanders based on this conversation with Elizabeth Warren. When the Tara Reid allegation came out, of course she was absolutely silent, had nothing to say about this much more serious accusation from someone who is much less powerful than Elizabeth Warren, needs a lot less backup than Elizabeth Warren does, and like had multiple people that she had told about over the years, as opposed to this Elizabeth Warren rumor, which is not nearly as corroborated.
Absolutely. So, as far as an African American man, and as someone who has to see these things going on, um nonstop, just in the past 3 days alone, how fucked do you think we are with Biden? Like, seriously, like, how fucked are we?
Like, where is Joe Biden? Like, where is his campaign? Because I mean, I like pointing out that even during the primary, like he was winning states without having any offices open, without like really running a campaign. The media kind of ran his campaign for him. And like, does anyone? I've asked this question before. Does anyone think the Democrats and Joe Biden are in a good spot right now? No matter how good, how bad Trump's coronavirus response is, it's still a response. And as harsh as this is to say, the fact of the matter is, no matter how bad this thing gets, most people are going to be fine, and most of them are going to say, look back and say, well, nobody I really knew was affected by it. Yeah, my aunt died, but she was old, blah 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 blah. And I think Trump, did a pretty good job. Like, unless it is absolutely positively catastrophic for a significant amount of people, he's going to come out looking, like a leader who got us through, this troubled time. I mean, the same thing happened with Bush. Not only did the same thing happen with Bush and Katrina, specifically now liberals are talking about what a great job George Bush did in disaster response to Katrina, specifically to compare him to Trump. Now, I recall very clearly how upset people were by, his inept by Bush's inept response in the aftermath of Katrina, but we see how easily history is rewritten, even for people who were his political enemies. I think it's a pipe dream to think that by November you're going to convince people that already like Trump that he's somehow screwed up or did some horrible thing, no matter how bad. I mean, of course, it's there's been a catastrophic failure, but we see catastrophic failures in New York, and Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, has gotten nothing but PR buzz from this positive coverage from his absolute abject failure at coronavirus response. So I don't know how. Like, I would even feel nervous if Bernie Sanders were the nominee right now, because these types of crises, whether it be a pandemic or a war, people are going to immediately, no matter how badly they think of Trump, they're going to give him like kind of like a little bit of credit for just being in charge at the time.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Rudy Giuliani on nine
Yeah,
11.
exact same thing. Exact same thing. Rudy Giuliani, just an absolute, horrific human being, but had like 10 years of good press, just because of he was happened to be mayor during the worst domestic terrorist attack in U.S. history. That's the only thing. That's his claim to fame. He was just the guy in charge, and he didn't immediately resigned in disgrace, so he got the positive benefit from that.
Absolutely. So a few days ago, and you posted about it as as we all did. Uh, Joe said, if you have a, if you can't decide between me and Trump, you ain't black. Um, what was your first response to that?
My first response is to laugh because it was kind of a funny thing to say, and then I mean, because he was just feeling himself. He was feeling over. I mean, I think this is what he said in response. Oh, he was being a smart aleck, and I was being a smart aleck back, and I think that's probably what most normal people reaction to it. But what I found interesting, and I did say like some people were seeing this like, oh my god, this is incredibly racist. Yeah, it's incredibly racist, but it's a type of like racism that like people, even like the average person, will find like endearing. I was like, oh, he's just telling it like it is. Of course black people shouldn't vote for Trump. Like, I knew most like no regular people would not be like upset by it. But what I did find interesting was some of the high level, like liberals with the blue check marks, who were put in a conundrum by this, because if Bernie Sanders had ever said anything like this, they would have had to fucking write a book about how racist Bernie Sanders is. Like, that's been their beat, that's been their modus operandi. I remember when Bernie Sanders was asked about police violence and what would you tell a black child to do in response, and Bernie Sanders gave the only answer that I've ever heard to the question. The answer that my father gave me is like, do what the police man says, so you don't get shot in the head. That's all he said. That's all Bernie Sanders said. Only answer I've ever heard, and people still tore him up for it, called him racist, yada yada yada. Like, how I can't imagine those same people applying the same standards to Joe Biden, and they couldn't imagine themselves doing it either. So there was a lot of ideological fights on the blue check black Democrat class, because this was Joe Biden is a bridge too far for some of them. We saw it even with Kamala Harris when she called out Joe Biden's racism before endorsing him. The man, like, Barack Obama picked him because he was a shitty white man. That's the entire
Mhm.
reason he was chosen in the first place. It was like, we don't think America is going to be ready to elect a black man named Barack Obama. We need to put this racist white man next to him to let them know it was okay.
Absolutely. I notice a lot of the white libs are like, he can't be racist. He worked for Obama, and it's very like, I have a black friend.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
No, it was Obama doing, I have a racist white friend. Me and Joe still get along. He was trying to convince white America that he could get along with their racist uncle. And that's what the function Joe Biden is. But the weird thing that happened during the course of it is that because Obama was so young and so cool, that somehow rubbed off on Joe. I mean, because Obama was so young and cool, that rubbed off on Biden, and people started thinking Biden was cool for some reason when he's absolutely
It was those
not.
memes. I
Yeah,
know it was those
it was
memes.
those damn memes. Even the Onion has apologized. The Onion writer who started it has apologized for creating the cool Uncle Joe meme, because he's not like a cool person. He's like a kind of a mean, angry. I mean, before even getting into the Tara Reid and how he's shitty to women, like he's also like racist and a liar and a serial plagiarizer. He's just, before you even get into the really nastiest stuff about him, he's just like not a good dude, and there's no reason he should be the nominee or in charge of anything.
Absolutely. I did watch back after I saw Joe say, "Oh, well, we were both joking about Charlemagne." I watched it back and I don't see Charlemagne joking at all. I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell with Charlemagne because Charlemagne is like a he. I think my friend Ricky Wallace puts it best. He's like a troll, really. He's always trying to get a reaction. It's hard to tell when what he's saying. He's being 100% serious, or if he's just trying to get a reaction and trying to get a controversial thing. It's impossible to tell with him. But I don't. I I would say that I don't think Charlemagne is mad at Joe Biden, but he wants to get him back on so he can answer those questions
Yeah,
and get those good clips. I think that's the main thing Charlemagne wants. I do have to say, like, Charlemagne. It's kind of sad to see Charlemagne look like such a good interviewer here because I really, I mean, I guess he's a good interviewer technically speaking, but he's like not a good person with good politics or anything. He's kind of a bad person with bad politics. Like if he's in the pantsuit anthem video that Lena Dunham did for Hillary Clinton, and there's like some dark stuff about him too. He's not a great guy, but he makes like almost everyone on cable news look like a fool in comparison to the way that they interview Joe Biden.
absolutely. The way he handled Elizabeth Warren
Oh
was
yes.
impeccable. It was so amazing. But then he had Pete Buttigieg on and he was like BFFs. I was
Yeah,
so
yeah.
confused. He is such a racist. I
Yeah,
didn't get
yeah, Charlemagne is just like, I mean, they what they do is like gossip, news. It's like I mean, he's closer to Howard Stern than anybody in politics. Really, it just so happened that the Breakfast Club got really popular, and some PR people for these campaigns started bringing candidates on, and now every candidate thinks they have to go on. It was actually really shocking to me because people got very upset about Joe Rogan, light endorsement of Bernie Sanders. Like Charlemagne is just as, if not significantly more problematic a person on and off the air than Joe Rogan. And all these candidates go on Joe Rogan. All these candidates go on Charlemagne, and it's never any. Is not controversial. And joke is because like most white people don't really know that much about Charlemagne because if they did, they would be like they would react the same way that they performatively reacted to Joe Rogan.
it. Absolutely. What do you hope to see happen? Like we have our convention coming up in a few months. Hoping I have a room out in Milwaukee. I'm in PA, but I will be going if it's still happening in person. What do you hope to see? Do you think they're going to replace him?
I mean, I guess the one thing is like the one kind of shred of hope is like even people who support Biden have openly talked about replacing him, have openly talked about replacing him between now and November. I don't think they would want to replace him with Sanders because they really went all in on stopping Bernie Sanders, but. Maybe I don't know who they replace him with. It would be somebody who's also bad too. So I'm not placing too much of my energy or hopes in it. I I mean, this is the guy you chose. You didn't want Bernie Sanders. You didn't want the movement behind him. Like this is what you chose. Like good luck.
Yeah. I've been saying this for literally about a year and I don't know if I believe this or I'm just so terrified that I'm going to convince myself. So if it doesn't happen, I'll be happy. But I still think it's going to be Hillary as VP, and then they'll pull the 25th Amendment, say he's like, not up to it mentally, and then she becomes president. That's my fear. And I could totally see that happening because I don't see her letting another woman be first woman VP or first woman president. I don't see her letting that happen.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I feel like the Clintons are kind of they've given up. They're kind. I feel like they're kind of disempowered. This was more of a Obama coup, making sure that Biden got in and that Pete dropped out and that Amy dropped out. So I don't know. I really thought that the real chaos option was that Biden would go against his word to nominate a woman. Like I assumed that he was that his plan all along was to, to say he was going to do that, and then when it gets down to it, to say, I vetted so many wonderful women, but unfortunately, none of the ones we asked chose to be in it. So now I'm choosing, whoever. I really didn't think he was be committed to it. But if he did choose a woman, I think Amy is kind of the obvious safe pick for them. She's personable. She has some kind of national profile. I feel like she checks more of the boxes, and she was actually, she did better than expected in this past election. Elizabeth Warren did a lot worse than expected. Gillibrand, I don't think she's in the conversation. She did like tremendously worse than she was expected. Klobuchar actually showed that she could, like, people actually kind of like and gravitate towards her on a national level. So I would probably expect him, if we're not getting into any weird stuff, to just choose Amy, and then they run a kind of tepid, boring campaign and eventually lose.
I think it would be amazing if he didn't pick Kamala, because watching K Hive melt down
Oh yeah,
is beautiful.
yeah. Like, there's no way he can pick Colin. I mean, she didn't even make it to like her state's primary. Like, what would be the purpose of him choosing her? Sorry, K High, but like, what does she bring to the table as the VP candidate? Like, she has nothing except a little bit of name recognition.
What's your response when people say, Biden should pick Warren because then she'll get the Sanders vote?
I think I mean, I think it's kind of a pipe dream. I think, again, like, um, I mean, people, pretty clearly chose Sanders over Warren. A lot of people were kind of unhappy with how she talked about Sanders during this campaign, how she talked about Medicare for all, how she continues to talk about Medicare for all. She said some stuff, like, even within as week recently as a week, that shows that she's not really as, tough on, as strong on it as she claimed to be originally. I don't think that's going to be a unity thing, especially since it took, like, she never endorsed Sanders. Maybe if she had endorsed Sanders at some point, that would be a thing. But she didn't. She sat out like she did in 2016. There's been like no reconciliation of any sort. Like, there, it doesn't seem like most of the Sanders people are just like done with the Democratic Party, at least for now. They feel that way. I don't know why he would pick Elizabeth Warren. I don't think she brings really anything. Like, pick Bernie Sanders if you want. Bernie Sanders people. If that's what
Yeah,
if that's the thing you if
seriously.
that's the thing you want, pick Bernie Sanders. You're not gonna do some three-dimensional chess here to win them over. Like, you gotta pick Bernie Sanders if you want Sanders people, and even then you won't get all of them.
Oh no. It would be so hilarious though to watch all of the shit libs go absolutely crazy because they've been trying to get everyone to vote for Biden, and then if he picked Bernie for VP, they'd have to be like, "Oh shit, I still got to vote for Biden."
Oh, they'll be like, "Oh, well, I've always loved Bernie. It's just his diehard
Right,
supporters
right.
that I couldn't stand." That would be their out. Absolutely.
It's like we don't need any more old white men. Biden, you better vote for Biden. How quickly they forget.
Yes.
um so I digress a bit, but I want to talk a little bit about your writing. You've written for Truth Dig, Jacobin, and one of the articles that I really enjoyed that you wrote is on Truth Dig. Neoliberalism is the true villain of the Joker. Now, I really like that, and I think I'm going to have to watch the Joker again now to kind of see what you're talking about. What is your take on that?
So basically, I want to start this off by saying this is not me claiming that Todd Phillips, who directed this film and also the Hangover trilogy, is like a socialist or anything. That's not what I'm saying. But what did happen with the filming of the Joker is he wanted to tell like a Martin Scorsese type gritty, kind of crime drama character study type film. And he tried to approach it as rationally as possible. So he starts off with, you have this guy. He's poor. His problems are he's poor. He has mental illness. He his job. He loses his job. All these bad things are happening to him. Why? And it's and when you think about it, and it's like, oh, it's because he lives in a city where all the poor are immiserated, while a billionaire named Thomas Wayne runs everything, and is also like grasping for more power by running for mayor. Thomas Wayne, who's Batman's father tradition in the comics, becomes like this Trump stand-in basically in the film. And the film's argument is basically like the Joker isn't like just some evil, crazy person who, just wants to hurt people for no reason. He says like, no, if we're being logical about this, if his violence is a response to the violence he faces every day because he's poor, because he has mental illness, because his the services are being cut in the state, while Wall Street people on Wall Street, hoard tons and tons of money. Everybody else is getting the poor are getting poorer and the richer are getting richer. It's just basic things we see happen every day. It makes a great story, and it's also like basic like, yeah, Marxist analysis. So my argument is that even if Todd Phillips himself personally isn't a socialist of any sort, Joaquin Phoenix might be, actually, because he donated to Bernie Sanders several times, so he might actually be a socialist. But
Oh, did he?
yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah, but when they were working on this character together and just exploring his world, it only makes sense that the real enemy of the film is like income inequality and austerity measures and the 1% and the guys on Wall Street. Like, they are the real villains, and not just one mentally ill guy who is gets so sick and tired and fed up of all the violence he faces, that he decides to finally fight back. He's not like the real villain here. He's a victim of these circumstances, and like, it's the real people with real power that he fights back against. Maybe not in a wholly positive or good way, but he does fight back. And it's a for me personally, it's a joy to see. It's a film where you have like working class uprising, where you have a black woman with an afro with a sign that says "kill the rich," and she's busting up like cop cars. Like, that shit's cool to me. I like that. So I don't and when the Joker first, before it came out, it was by liberals, it was labeled as this like alt right fantasy, when it's for to me, it's nothing like that at all. It's a fantasy for like people who are downtrodden constantly, who face constant violence from capitalistic system. It's basically a revenge thriller for them.
Absolutely. That is, oh my God, that makes so much sense. I I'm one of those annoying people who kind of tries to dissect every single film I watch, even if it's like Kindergarten Cop or something really dumb. I just break down like this whole philosophical, hypothesis. So I love the fact that your show, your podcast, Struggle Sesh, is political and pop culture. And you post about films a lot, which I love. What are some other films like that you think are, maybe the meaning gets lost a little, that they are more philosophical?
Well, my big one is the Purge series. The Purge series, for people who don't know, is this kind of deliberately, B movie horror series. They've done 4 films and a TV series, and it's based on the premise of that for one night of every year in this, alternate, maybe sometimes futuristic. America, one night every year, all crime is legal. You can do any crime you want. You can't be arrested for it. You can't get in trouble for it. And if you watch the trailers, all you see is, these images of people in mask, attacking their fellow citizens just because. Now, you could, if you all you see is a trailer, you might look at that and think that's a reactionary fantasy. What that's suggesting is that without laws, without cops, without all these rules to keep all us animals in order, what we will immediately descend into chaos and start attacking each other. And so that's why we need to have buy guns and have, castle doctrine laws and all this crap, right? But the film is saying the exact opposite. All the films, they're very explicit about this. There's some, like, especially the most recent one that came out, the first Purge. That one is one of the most explicit, like, left wing films I've, like, ever seen from a mainstream, like,
Scared the
Hollywood
shit out of me.
studio. Yeah, and basically says, like, no, if when these things are set up, first of all, the purpose behind the purge is for the right wing government that's in charge in the purge universe, to kill black and brown and poor people. That is it. The purge is just a stand-in for our modern day criminal justice system. They're meant to be the same thing. It's just a way to eliminate the undesirables. And also, part of the film is that when the purge actually starts, like, no one is breaks any laws except, like, laws to, like, gather and have street parties and smoke weed in the street. That's all people do. And we're talking about, poor black and brown people portrayed as, like, not being inherently criminal in any real way. When you let black people and brown people just live their lives without cops and without, the laws against them, all they will do is just hang out and have a good time. Like, that's all that's saying. So it's not this, reactionary fantasy that we all need to be on guard against one another. It's saying the exact opposite. And so because people aren't breaking the law when the purge happens, the right wing government hires right wing militias, and we're talking about direct stand-ins for things like Blackwater, and they're like white supremacists and they're Klansmen. All in, like, every film, like, the villain is like a Klansman or a Nazi or like a Eric Prince type, and they are hired by the government to go and actually go and kill the black and brown and the poor citizens in order to eliminate their numbers, and so that the wealthy can reap the benefits. And the wealthy, but also people who actually have money during the purge, they can spend all this money buying security, buying guns, buying home defense. So even if they don't participate in the purge themselves, they all end up so much safer than people who are poor and live in government housing and can't afford any of this protection. Like, at every level, the film has, like, the purge films have a class analysis that's very clear and, very intelligent. And I really, really love the films. And I'm sad that they get kind of, people think they're the exact opposite of what they actually end up being.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Those are very profound and scary as hell at the same time. And it's the one, I think it was the second last one. It was like the purge election, or it was something political. And that was terrifying because it immediately, I was like, okay, we're having anarchy. Like, here it goes. We're going down. Like, everyone's going down. It was kind of too true with like Trump and all right and everything. Um, what is what are some of your favorite films that have impacted you the most, that inspire you to do a podcast like that?
Like, the main thing, it wasn't really a particular film that inspired me to do the podcast. The thing, at least not any films I like. It was mostly like bad films that kind of, and even though we mostly cover good films, but the thing that really drove me to start this podcast was because when you look at kind of the cultural wars that have happened online the past few years, whether it's, especially around film, whether it's, the Joker, or Fight Club, or yeah, the Last Jedi or the Ghostbusters, Answer the Call. You see all these culture wars happening, and you're told like basically on one side are all the good people, the progressive people, and they have this opinion on this movie, and on the other side are the bad people, and they have this opinion on this movie, and the movie itself might be a complete piece of corporate garbage, dished out by a company that doesn't care about minority or the oppressed. It'll probably be directed by a white man who has only ever who mostly does stuff for and by white men, and you still will be told that you're a bad person if you don't like this corporate product by a white man, even if you're like a black woman who just happens to think that maybe The Last Jedi sucks, or who doesn't like, the Ghostbusters reboot. Like, and I started the show to basically address that, like, hey, you don't have to like tie your politics so closely to your consumption of these products. You can analyze the politics in each of these products, while not making the product itself your politics. So that's why it's called struggle session, because we talk about things that might ostensibly have like positive good politics, like for example Black Panther. But I actually analyzed that film and thought it had like pretty little bad racial politics, even though in the culture war we were told that we all had to like it. Or something like Fight Club, which we're told culturally online that we're supposed to, if you're on the left, you're not supposed to like Fight Club anymore, because the alt right says snowflake out of context, and sometimes have Tyler Durden avatars. But I went back and watched the film, and we analyzed it for our show, and came across with the idea that if you actually watch the film, what it's about is you take your individual pain and your suffering and your ennui from living in late stage capitalism, and then you find and you talk about it with your neighbors. You get to know your neighbors, you organize with your neighbors, you form a group, and then you form a group in order to take down credit card companies. That's explicitly like left wing narrative in this film that's been maligned as like some alt right starter kit.
Absolutely. Fight Club is one of the best films ever, hands down. The one film I saw recently, and I tend to go more independent and foreign film than this, but did you see Parasite?
Yes, yes.
Oh my god, that film was perfection. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I love it. Bong Joon-ho is, I think, probably he might be the greatest living director. His catalog is just outstanding. I love if you like, if you want some more explicit class conflict in film, check out Snowpiercer, which is
Oh, right, my husband watched that. I
yeah,
gotta see.
yeah, they have a TV show that just came out now. I hear it's not quite as good as the film, but the film is really, really, really good. I loved Parasite. I did. Yeah, I really enjoyed Parasite. I thought it was a really fantastic film that had, it seemed, but it was illustrative because, like, if to you and I, like the class conflict is very clear to us, but we saw that people like Chrissy Teigen thought the film was also good too, and like all these rich people. Elon Musk said it was his favorite film of the year.
Oh my
Yeah, it won Oscars, it won Golden Globes, it won all this approval. And so when you see that, you have to question, like, how clear is the message of this film? No matter how much we may personally love this film, like, how does this film get co-opted by the people that is attempting to destroy it? Like, not even further than that, like Bong Joon-ho, they're trying to this is a communist film director from South Korea, and where we hear the stories of, oh, this production studio wants to work with Bong Joon-ho. Oh, he's going to do a series with HBO. Oh, he's going to do this, that, the other. They're trying to like absorb him, like The Thing, and make him a part part of them in order to like make, because and this happens time and time again. You can read much smarter people talk about this, write about this, but anytime like our voice of this subaltern gets out there, it's always filtered and then co-opted by the larger powers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my God. I saw it on Valentine's Day. My husband asked me what I want to do on Valentine's Day. I was like, hello, see Parasite. It was amazing. It was so good. The execution of it was beautiful. Um, I can't believe Christy Teigen likes it. She's not that bright then, because that's like she shouldn't like that. It should make her be introspective.
Yes, it should.
Oh my word. What other films do you enjoy watching? What's one that is an old classic that you can maybe you did a recent show on?
Let's see. See. So, one classic that I revisit, not a film but a TV series, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is which was always one of my favorite shows when I was a teenager. I've always loved vampires and horror stuff, and this was it came out at the exact right point in my life. Now I know that Joss Whedon, as an artist and as a man, has had his fortunes, fall rightfully so, since the show came out. But it was interesting going back and revisiting it, even though it has, lots of stuff. It doesn't. First of all, it's a show that doesn't really have a political message. It's much more about emotions and like what does it mean to grow up, become an adult, deal with all these things. It's not really explicitly political, but it was still interesting to go back and watch this show that, even though it's kind of out of fashion, maligned now, it had elements of LGBTQ representation that were really extremely groundbreaking at the time. It had an actual couple, a lesbian couple in the show who had their ups and downs, and they were treated like regular people like of course lesbians are regular people, but on TV they weren't treated as such at the time, and they treated like this this gay couple in very good ways. So I am a advocate even now for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, even though it's cheesy, even though Joss Whedon sucks on a personal level, it's still a good show to me.
How do I digress, but that kind of made me think of something. How do you cope with people like when you like films or shows and all of a sudden you learn they're like Biden supporters? Are you able to like watch their films and stuff still?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you have to be. I mean, because I mean, there was a point in time when like a lot of people in Hollywood were communists, but we had that whole McCarthy thing to get rid of that. So I mean, it's very like there's so few people in Hollywood with good politics. There's so few people seemingly in Hollywood that are good people. You just have to, like, the reason you watch that movie or listen to that song or read that book isn't because you think the person who made it or the people who made it are like good people. You're doing that because there's something about that work that's greater than the person who makes it. I mean, that's what art is. It's about, humanity expressing something greater than ourselves that can be shared, across all our boundaries and cultures and outside of our frail forms, etc., etc. And so, like, I'm very big on separating the art from the artist, whether they're a truly horrendous human being or just kind of like a shitty poster on Twitter. You can't, like, you're never, like, if all you consume was art by perfect people, you probably aren't going to consume very much like authentic, serious, worthwhile art, or you're just going to be lying to yourself about and pretending that all the people who make it aren't human beings. And I don't think either one of those propositions is beneficial to you as a human. Like I just don't think. I think you have to, you have to separate art from artists. Now, this is separate from when you're talking about, say, financially supporting an artist who's actively doing harm or something like that, pirate it. If it's something you feel, a moral quandary about. But I advocate very hard. I mean, that's part of the reason why we started Struggle Session 2, is because so much of the writing from the left broadly, meaning, liberals, Democrats, about culture and films and movies and TV shows, was this kind of, there was this real spurt during the later Obama years where they would just go back and find this movie or this TV show, something that maybe meant a lot to people, and then try to like retroactively like cancel it and say it's bad and you're a bad person if you don't like it. Excuse me, if you do like it because it has, this problematic joke or this thing in it that wasn't good at the time, but maybe was acceptable at the time, or certainly isn't acceptable now. I don't see the benefit of looking in art that way, where we're trying to cut things off and say we can't watch these things. No, what I want to say is watch this thing with your brain on. Like my wife really likes Down Abbey. I watched a bit of it. I think it's a good show. Now it's a show with extreme conservative values. It's written by literally a Tory lord, or like he's the equivalent of a Republican congressman, and it has extremely conservative values. But I can still enjoy the show. The important thing is to actually talk about and say, actually, the world that the show presents is not the real world, and the values that the show presents aren't true, even if it's funny watching Lady Grantham like be catty to her daughter or whatever.
Absolutely. So, if you could tell our audience to watch one film, what would it be?
One film. I would probably say this is an extremely underrated film, extremely haunting, or uplifting, depending on how you view it, and that's Aniara. Aniara. It's Aniara. Believe is a Swedish film. It's on Hulu. It's a sci-fi film that is about this kind of near future sci-fi. It's in the future, where we have these luxury cruises that can take us to Mars or the moon. Well, one of these luxury vessels gets shifted off course, and they don't know when they'll be able to get back, to Earth or Mars or whatever. And we kind of just look at how their lives and society develops from there. And it's based on this, uh, epic poem, Swedish poem. It's just a really mind-bending, outstanding sci-fi film that I don't think enough people have seen.
All right, I am writing that down. That's your assignment, guys. Whoever's watching tonight, I see you guys. I'm gonna I'm gonna get back to you and make sure you watched it. Please let everyone know where they can find you, what your Twitter is, how they can access your podcast, everything like that.
All right, yeah. So just check out Struggle Session at patreon.com/struggle session. You can subscribe. If you pay us $5 for the bonus episodes, you get one, but often two bonus episodes each and every week, including commentaries. We did some really interesting, fun commentaries on the Star Wars prequels that people have been talking about a lot. We've covered tons of movies, video games, anime, books, all aspects of pop culture with a left, with socialist mindset in mind, where we talk about the politics of these things, and not just the politics of the storylines, but the politics of how these things are produced, how media works. We've been covering the rise of Disney, and how Disney is buying up all these properties and IP, all this stuff, even though they're like Disney is in charge of like so many of our films, even though Disney itself does not have a very good track record of actually making and producing movies. So if you were listening to Struggle Session, you would have known that the new Disney Star Wars trilogy would end up in the disaster that it ended up being, for a lot of the fans, because Disney just doesn't know how to make movies yet. But when you hear about this on the mainstream media, all you hear about is how much money they have and how much money they make, even though they aren't actually very good at the primary thing they do now.
Absolutely. Right on. This is a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Leslie. I am so glad we had a chance to chat. And thank you guys so much for watching. I have a candidate coming back tomorrow night. His name is Rusty Williams. He's in West Virginia. He was diagnosed with cancer and testicular cancer, couldn't afford treatment. It spread throughout his body, and now he is better and he is ready to fight. He's running, and hopefully will be elected this month. So we'll be talking again tomorrow night. And don't forget pre-orders of my book. I'm writing with Nate Sliver, aka Pat the Burner. Start next month. It's a parody on the resistance. So we're having fun writing that. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. And again, thank you so much, Leslie, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Take care.